So for the people who aren't super, familiar with your background, you were not like a technical person growing up. Like, and so you found your way to engineering roles and, really technical roles at Meta. I mean, probably Facebook then, but Meta
Right.
without a technical background. How does that happen?
It was a journey, an exhausting one, and one filled with lots of uh, you know concerns early on of whether I was making kind of the right decisions, and imposter syndrome, which many people feel from going from a non-technical background to very technical work. I started my career early in investment banking after college. Like many people, kind of when I was in college at Wake Forest University, private equity and venture capital and investment banking sounded very sexy, right? I wanted to be an investment banker. I watched all the movies kind of growing up, and I was like, this is the career for me. But after 2 years of doing it and working 80 hours a week, and private equity groups not investing, and working in a bunch of pitch decks which weren't going anywhere and making very little money at the time, it's like I think I may want to do something a little bit differently. So I had an opportunity to joined a tech company that was literally 2 blocks down the street, walking distance from the investment bank, who was looking for people of my background who worked on acquisitions and business valuation, did M&A work to help them think about consolidating other companies within their tech industry. It was a media company, content delivery network that worked with Google and YouTube and others at the time to cache all their video content. So I decided to kind of make the leap of faith. I actually had a friend working there at the time, which made the transition easy. And for the first 6 months or so, I was working on acquisitions and doing M&A work. And then the company went through a major reorg. It was a bit during the recession, and laid off much of the senior kind of executive staff. So 2 or 3 layers between me and the CEO at the time were just cut overnight. So of course, I'm nervous, I'm scared, and then the CEO comes to me and asks me to change my role within the company. They needed help with the supply chain and expanding the company from having a US presence to a global
Yeah.
international presence, and asking me for help to start negotiating the supply chain, working with our network engineering team, and becoming a bit more technical so that I could expand the network. So at the time, I had no idea what that involved, but I quickly found myself, after kind of finishing an MBA at Arizona State, going back to night school as soon as I finished my MBA, and trying to do the Cisco Certified Network Associates, kind of an entry level network engineering kind of 101 program, while asking the network engineers in my company a million questions kind of day and night. So I was learning from the bootstrap. So massive imposter syndrome. I had no idea what I was doing at the time, but luckily I was surrounded by people who were just gracious in answering questions and wanting to kind of mentor me early in the career. So
Yeah.
fast forward kind of 4 years of doing that, became very technical and kind of network engineering. And then Facebook happened to find me kind of 2014, looking for someone of my background who had worked in kind of finance before, but was also technical from a network engineering perspective, to help them build and expand their entire network. So kind of fortuitous at the time that I had kind of the finance kind of hat and had kind of a technical background. I could kind of combine those skills into something that Meta was looking for to help them actually expand their global network today, which is one of the biggest in the world.
So for people who kind of count themselves out of roles because they feel like they may not be experienced or they may not have exactly what the listing is looking for, I mean, you're a testament to you should probably take the shot if it's interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting because I believe studies show that this happens to women actually more than men. Men tend to be a bit more overconfident and applying for roles that they may not necessarily be qualified for on paper. Whereas sometimes women, from what studies show, will look at some of the qualifications and say, hey, I meet maybe 3 out of 5 and not all 5, and then talk themselves out of applying. And one of the things that I've always encouraged people to do in their career is like, look, if you meet 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5, doesn't matter. Go through the interview loop if you get accepted. Have the conversation, because there may be something that they're looking for that you may have no idea. You may impress them in that conversation. You may be a non-conventional thinker from a non-conventional kind of background, original thinker, I mean, and that might be something that's unique and original and creative that may take that role to a new level that they hadn't even anticipated. And that happens so often. That's why it's so important to put your best foot forth, apply to these roles, and take the leap of faith. I think it's so important that you don't talk yourself out of opportunities and blocking
Mm.
your blessing by doing that.
Telling
Right?
yourself no. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for people who come up technical, I remember when I was learning front end, it was like, one day you had to learn, Ruby on Rails. The next day you had to learn
Hmm.
Python. The next day you had to learn this other language. And it was like a never ending cycle of different things coming out that you should probably know. Characteristically, because you work at one of the biggest companies in the world and you're seeing the future, you're building the future. What kind of characteristics should a person who wants to be in leadership in the technology space be developing?
I think a few things. Mark talked about this recently on the Acquired uh, Chase kind of podcast at the Chase Center kind of a couple of weeks ago. And if people haven't watched it, I think it's available on Spotify. But one of the things I find interesting in kind of Silicon Valley, and kind of Mark mentioned, is that if you're wanting to be in a technical leadership role at many of the larger kind of companies in Silicon Valley, you need to be technical, right? So historically, kind of in Silicon Valley, you would find that many of the CEOs and people in kind of VP leadership of major tech companies weren't actually technical. They might have one technical founder or one kind of VP of Eng, but many of the folks weren't technical. And sometimes those companies just don't survive longer term. And you look at just how rapid innovation is happening and the technology trends, you have to have technical people that can help you navigate those trends, read the tea leaves, kind of see the future, and learn how to take the company from kind of A to Z. So, if you're wanting to work in kind of a technical kind of engineering role, you got to be a sponge, right? You got to soak up knowledge. You have to ask questions. You have to take advantage of tools and resources that are free, sometimes paid. Understand, what the Amazons, the Googles, the Metas, the OpenAIs, the Anthropics of the world are focused on. Look, understand kind of their roadmaps, listen to kind of their podcasts, meet with people. I still encourage people kind of early in their career to do informational interviews with people. Like, it's so easy sometimes just to go on LinkedIn, find a person, hopefully, a person of color, a brother or sister who is just willing to just talk to you and kind of give you information. And if you ask astute questions, usually people are impressed by that and willing to kind of help you. I can't tell you the number of times I've done this when people reached out to me on LinkedIn wanting to know more about Meta, my role in particular. I'll give them the time of day. It's closed mouths don't get fed. Reach out, ask those questions, right? Understand kind of the challenges that they're facing kind of day to day. What are the things that they're working on now in terms of kind of roadmaps and where they're going in the future? What kind of technologies are they exploring? For me as a person that builds global infrastructure, my industry is changing kind of rapidly. I'm always happy to talk about those things. So you have to ask questions, you have to read, you have to stay current with kind of technology trends because the space is moving so rapidly. So I think that's the words of encouragement that I would have for folks.
To that point of the space is moving so quickly. I love talking about small business owners, entrepreneurs, and giving them
Mhm.
value from these conversations because not everybody's going to be building technology, but a lot will be using technology, employing technology to scale.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so for AI, which we're having a big global conversation about AI, and to your point, is moving rapidly. What is potentially overlooked for those small business owners and entrepreneurs? What are we not paying enough attention to that could be valuable to us?
Yeah, I think technology is the great equalizer, right? So when you think about kind of rewind, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, however long ago, kind of Uber and Lyft or that, like, remember being kind of traveling or being kind of in New York and trying to hail a taxi. I can't tell you the number of times as a black man I got passed over for, a white kind of counterpart, right? Because they didn't know about me. They didn't know who I was. You couldn't kind of see the background and just assuming some stereotype about me, right? So I'm standing there looking crazy on the street, trying to wave down a taxi and can't get one, right? But all of a sudden, Uber and kind of Lyft and others come along and you can get transportation at and access at kind of your fingertips, right? So it's just kind of one example. So when you think about it as like a small business owner or kind of creator, like AI is one of those technologies that can be the great equalizer, especially if you're a small business. I talked about this recently in kind of another kind of panel conversation, but one of the things that we're doing at Meta is launching something called AI Studio, which is available now for kind of creators even kind of small businesses. And if you're a creator, leveraging AI to be able to create an AI extension, an agent of yourself that can communicate with your fan base globally, that can push merchandise for you, that can push ticket sales, that can reply to common stories and kind of DMs and help you scale yourself is really powerful, right? Don't leave money on the table because you don't speak 8 languages, right? Like leverage the AI to do those things. If you're a small business, you know, and you're a startup, your capital and your balance sheet is going to be pretty limited, right? So just as everyone has a social media page and an email address, and kind of a website, think about the future as having kind of these AI agents that can help you scale your businesses, that can communicate with customers kind of globally, that can offer discounts, help you with customer return, help you predict kind of the creative for ads, help you figure out who your actual audience is better than you can infer, right? So there's just so many opportunities as a small business owner or as a creator to leverage these tools. So I think people really have to be early adopters and explore some of these things. One of the announcements we just launched yesterday at the Connect conference was Llama 3.2, an update to kind of Llama 3.1, which is our long language model. The exciting thing about that is multimodal. So I use this at work all the time. We have an internal tool called MetaMate, which uses our long language model. And I used to spend hours sometimes working on presentations and putting together kind of charts and graphs and writing meeting notes. I uploaded kind of a Google Doc with all my meeting notes and a bunch of other data to our internal long language model. I was like, hey, summarize all this data, put it into kind of 4 or 5 action items. Also summarize some of the data into a chart table with XYZ kind of columns and these headers and something that I can export into kind of a broader presentation. And within 30 seconds that I rendered all of it. Normally that would take me hours to do, right? So it's about being more efficient. How can I scale myself? How can I get time back in my day to do other things, right? As an executive, I don't want to spend 4 hours in Excel, right? Or PowerPoint, right? I want to use tools that can make me more efficient so I can spend my time thinking about strategy, where the business needs to go in the future, and scaling myself. That's where my time needs to be spent. So it's just one example. There's just so many use cases for AI that create just efficiencies for you and allow you to scale yourself. And I think people should really explore those.
No, I love that. There was this quote I found from you. This was a couple of years ago, where you said, "Connecting the world is really one of the fundamental challenges of our generation, and that's an idea we really embrace. We work with partners
Mm.
to develop innovative technologies around the world that help some of the biggest connectivity challenges in solving them, and together we're bringing more people online to a faster
Absolutely.
internet." And so I think about, again, to those people who don't work at the biggest companies in the world but are building, hopefully one day, the biggest companies. What can we learn from you and your role in a company like this, that you guys get laser focused on a mission, laser focused on solving big problems, that we can, as small business owners, entrepreneurs, learn from? Like, how do we learn scale at our stages from a Meta?
Yeah. I think, as a business owner or someone who's kind of building products, I think you always have to be thinking about the idea of how do things scale in the future. And it is a hard thing to think about in terms of kind of the trade-offs that you have to make when you're building a new product or kind of launching the business. How am I going to uniquely create and deliver value to people at scale, right? Because you don't want to build businesses or products that can't scale or kind of reach kind of multiple people, because then you're kind of boxed in into kind of a corner. I'll give you a good example. I have worked on a number of things that I felt at Meta. I will say it proudly, right? It was a learning experience for me. I was building kind of a startup inside of Meta kind of 6 years ago, a connectivity program that had some traction early on in terms of building internet exchanges in emerging markets. And I couldn't find partners to scale because the business model didn't make sense. So I had to kind of go back to the table and think about, how do I kind of create a business model that other carriers can kind of get behind? It's going to make them revenue, but also be cost affordable for people to adopt the technology and use it. So when I figured out kind of the business model that scaled, which was kind of debt financing for some of these companies that allowed them to have these longer term kind of loans with affordable kind of interest rates, or they could kind of take risk and make revenue and take bets and risk in these emerging markets where they otherwise wouldn't make revenue. The business model just made sense for them, right? So when I started to think about how do these things kind of scale long term, what's a commercial model to do that, I started to get traction pretty quickly. It became one of our most valuable kind of connectivity programs at Meta at the time, connecting tens of millions of people in sub-Saharan Africa and parts of kind of Latin America, providing people with more affordable internet and a better quality of experience. So you have to be thinking about long term is how across kind of the product or kind of the business or whatever the project or whatever it is that you're working on, how are these things going to scale longer term? How do I kind of get value to as many people as possible? And how can I do that in a repeatable, sustainable way?
I like that. So I'm sure you get asked by a lot of people, "Hey, will you mentor me? Hey, will you be the person I can call and email and etc." And while that's that's what it is, and I'm sure you've had mentors in your career.
Yeah.
How have you found? First of all, who are your mentors, and how have you found those mentorship relationships best developed? Because I'm sure it's not like, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" and it's just beautiful from there.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
I like to make that joke sometimes when I'm talking to people because I do get that question a lot. Every time I open LinkedIn or somehow someone gets kind of my email address asking me to kind of be their mentor. I'm like, it's kind of like asking someone to be your friend that you've never met before, right? Going up to a stranger like, hey, can you be my friend? It's like, it doesn't really work that way. It has to happen organically, right? So I think when you're networking in general, like one principle that I stand by is almost kind of like the comment I made earlier is how do I create value for someone else? Like take yourself out of the equation and figure out how do you add value for other people. When you can do that, typically those relationships develop kind of organically. When I first started at Meta, as an example, I wanted to have impact. I was eager like everyone else, but when I was kind of networking and building senior level kind of relationships and relationships with kind of cross-functional members across the organization, I was thinking about how do I make their jobs easier, more efficient? What do I do kind of uniquely that's going to add value to this situation or this kind of program? How can I help them and make their lives easier? When you can do that for people, whether it's at work, you know, networking, kind of meeting new people, trying to get business from someone, think about how do you add value to them first. And that's the best way to develop a relationship organically, especially if it's someone that you want to be a mentor or someone that you think that can kind of guide you longer term. It's like, what value are you bringing to them? Try to think about things selflessly and think about how do you add value for other people. Because typically people are going to, people with good hearts at least will want to help you kind of in return, right? And it has to be organic, right? You can't go in with the intention of getting something to be in transaction from other people. Think about how do you help them, and typically that comes back to you. I found that to be something that's worked for me throughout my career. In terms of mentors, inside of Meta, I have a couple people. Alvin Bowles, who runs kind of our ads team in North America, one of the senior VPs, has been someone instrumental in my career. Ime, one of our top Black executives inside of Meta, has always been kind of a mentor for me. Outside of Meta, kind of depends on just the spaces I operate. I do a lot of stuff on the creative side too, and kind of film production. Terrence J has always been a mentor for me, kind of on the production side. Yeah, a few people like that. I think I'm always finding new people in my career that I can kind of learn from. That's one of the things that I value: staying hungry, figuring out how to evolve myself over time, and just being eager to learn. I think if you remain eager to learn, you naturally just find people in different spaces that end up being kind of mentors for you and who want to help you.
There are people who have personal interests. Like, I'm glad you gave me the alley oop on the video production. There's people who don't work at the biggest companies in the world and have heavy, stressful schedules, and they try to find space for their interests, their hobbies, the things that just bring them joy and fill them up. How are you managing that? Because, I mean, you talk about the level of stress in work that you may have, when your impact reaches hundreds of millions of people. How do you manage those personal interests and the work?
Yeah, yeah. I get this question a lot too. And I won't give you a toxic answer like I'll sleep when I'm dead and I'll just work 24/7. You can't do that, right? Like, as we get older, health is wealth. Take care of yourself,
That's a
people.
fact.
Like,
That's a
take care of
fact.
yourself. It's a fact, right? I try to be very intentional about my time. And I've gotten better at this as I've aged. But, I have a pretty set routine in terms of where I spend my time and energy. So I'm one of those early risers, kind of like my dad was when he was younger. At 5 a.m., I'm kind of at the gym, I'm working out, have a set amount of time for that, eating breakfast after that from kind of 7 a.m. to Usually kind of 5:36, 6:30 p.m. I'm working, I'm focused, I'm locked into being present at work. After that, when I come home, kind of relax a bit, I usually allocate a couple hours to me for kind of the creative, right? When I can kind of sit back, be in kind of my environment where I'm relaxed and kind of do some creative thinking. I'm either working on writing, film projects. I'm working on something with my brothers now and spending kind of a few hours doing that, and then spending some time reading too. Reading's important too. You want to stay ahead. So I try to be intentional about the time I have during the week, and especially on weekends. You can do so much and fit so much in your day if you're intentional about it, but you have to put the energy there. And I think for people, sometimes that can just be exhausting trying to balance that schedule. But when you care about something intensely and you're passionate about it, you will put the time and energy into it to ensure that that manifests into something that you uh, can leverage to turn into something big, right? One of my first uh, feature films last year was Fear, a horror movie that got released in kind of theaters in January 2023 that I was the EP on. It was one of the first times that I had an opportunity to release a feature film, working with just amazing kind of talent, Deion Taylor, director, people like Terrence J, T.I., Joseph Okora. And it was kind of intimidating for me to be an EP on a project of kind of that scale, right? And it was a time commitment too to be invested. It was shot over kind of multiple weeks and kind of the pandemic. I was trying to balance work at a time where people were freaking out about health, trying to focus on their jobs, not kind of get laid off too. And I had to just be very intentional about kind of managing my time and putting in kind of the energy and carving out kind of that mental space for something I was passionate about that I knew that had the potential to be something big, right? So you have to kind of make those trade-offs and ask yourself, what are you willing to sacrifice? Are you willing to sacrifice, a couple more hours of sleep to get up and go to the gym and be healthy? Are you willing to spend 30, 45 more minutes a day of just reading so that you can educate yourself in kind of new spaces and learn a lot, right? It's like the 10,000 hour rule. People forget just, how valuable it is when you make that time commitment, those sacrifices. It just helps you propel yourself and get ahead.
How do you think about showing up as an authentic black man? Like, because when people see technology folks, and particularly technology folks in Silicon Valley, we I don't want to say historically, but we tend to think of, you kind of have to assimilate into the dress, the
Yeah.
way of being, and etc. And
Code switching, all
yeah,
that.
code
Yeah.
switching, all of that. So I mean, when I see you walk into a room and you got a blue sky in shirt on, like you're a real black
Yeah.
man. You know what I mean? Like, and so I wonder how you think about how you show up in the world.
Yeah. You know what? I wasn't always that way. I think it's interesting enough. When I first started at Meta early in my career, I was always worried about that because, I wanted to make the best impression. I was one of very few Black people kind of on the broader kind of engineering teams. And I was really cognizant about how I show up because I was worried about opening the door for the next person of color, the next brother or sister who wants to work there. I was like, if I fail, and we may not go hire any more Black people, right? That was kind of the mental anguish that I was working with at the time. That's a lot to put on someone's shoulders, especially early in their career in their 20s, right? But I was always thinking about the next generation. But one of the mottos at Facebook was, bringing your authentic self to work. And I was like, what does that really mean for me as a Black
A
man?
hundred
I mean,
percent.
is that everyone else,
A
right? I was like,
hundred percent.
it's not even a Black barbershop near me. Like, how am I gonna, So when I got comfortable, especially as I started landing impact and just developing kind of credibility, I was like, you know what? Like, I don't need to walk into a room and code switch or pretend to be someone else. I was like, you know what? Like, I'm gonna let people see my Facebook, my Instagram, my everyday life. I'm gonna be me, right? So I had this realization kind of a year or two after Meta, especially as I started, getting involved with some of the DEI programs too. I was like, how am I gonna attract people to want to work at Meta if I'm code switching and I'm being two different people? Like, that's not authentic, right? I wouldn't want to work with me. Like, who would want to work with someone like that, right? So I remember kind of going back to the pandemic when we had a Juneteenth celebration the first time at kind of Meta, and I held this broader panel with DeRay McKesson and Eva Chan, who's our VP of kind of fashion. And I was like, you know what? I'm wearing my chain. I'm in front of the whole company. Laying down. I'm gonna be myself. I was like,
It's a real
I'm
chain
gonna,
too. The chain is serious. The chain
yeah.
is serious. Yeah.
And people loved it, right? Heck, so I'm wearing this chain. I'm like, why can't I wear mine, right? Like, you got to be yourself. Like, and I think when you show up authentically, people respond to that. They respect you, they appreciate it, and they admire it, right? So I really try to be myself. I'm the same person in any room I walk in, whether I'm in an executive meeting at work, or if I'm, going to my church, or if I'm on this podcast, right? Yeah, I'm the same person. You're gonna get the same Aaron, and no matter what situation. And I value that, and I think I encourage people to do that.
I think what's important that you said that I don't want to get overlooked is you had to be good at your job too. And so,
Yeah, that's important too. That's important too. You,
yeah,
you have to do that too. You wanna be credible, right? You can't just come in the door, you know, be an extra and then not do anything, right? You gotta let your work speak for you too.
I had it.
Actions speak louder than words. So that's always important.
We had this great conversation that I'd love to rehash here because I don't think we went to it deep on InvestFest stage, but we talked about the imperative to get back into the office and
Hmm.
how and what that means, particularly for Black people who want to, achieve greater heights in their career. And if you can you kind of set the stage for that and make a case for whatever you believe is the best mode of thinking and method of operation for employees?
Yeah, yeah. I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this too because I get a bit of an unpopular answer, but I'll preface it with this. I am a big believer in the hybrid work model. At Meta, for the people that didn't go remote, we're in the office 3 days a week. I value being in the office because I have a global team. And oftentimes I'm put into meetings at the drop of a whim, right? I may need to help someone solve something that was like time critical. Tough to kind of do that on Zoom. The hallway kind of water cooler conversation sometimes is so much easier to hash things out very quickly, versus waiting 2 or 3 weeks to do the same thing over multiple kind of Zoom calls. So that proximity to kind of others, and just that environment of being able to kind of create culture and influence culture by being in the office is something that's really special to me because I enjoy like the camaraderie of being with colleagues, kind of friends in the office, and being in a war room together, especially when times are challenging, when we're working on hard problems. Like that's motivating to see, like, my colleague kind of next to me, sweating it out to, on a whiteboard, trying to figure these things out and rallying together. Like I love that. I think it's even more important for people who are younger in their career. Like, if you're 2 or 3 years in your career at a company, I wouldn't encourage you to work remote. Like I think you need to be able to see people face to face. I think you need to go understand the culture. It's hard to do that over Zoom. You can't really understand culture over Zoom. You need to be kind of in the office around people to understand kind of the cultural norms, understanding people's idiosyncrasies, understand the way why they are the way they are. You can only do that by interacting with them more frequently. And I think if you're a younger person in your career, very hard to find mentors over Zoom. Like just people just aren't going to have the time for that, right? I mean, some may, but it's just tough to do that. So being in the office may allow you to have that proximity to someone who can kind of help you in your career, who can, come to your desk or kind of your station or conference room and help you kind of navigate things and can kind of coach you a little bit. And it's easier to get that guidance when you're in the office. So I think that's important, especially for Black men and kind of Black women early in your career. Having kind of those mentors in person is something that's really invaluable kind of early in your career. Now, with that being said, can people still be successful working remotely kind of 5 days a week? Yes, we all did it in the pandemic. So it's possible. I didn't, my work productivity didn't change at all. I think that early on, like the first kind of couple weeks of the pandemic, everyone was kind of struggling to get adjusted. But after a time, like it became kind of a normal rhythm for me. So yeah, people can be productive remote, but I think early in your career, I would encourage you to be in the office.
Did that. There seems to be a surgence of particularly tech workers, but I'm sure in every industry we have this, particularly tech workers who are doing like these day in the life Instagram, day in the life
Yeah.
reels, day in the life, YouTube posts. Can you talk about the perspective of your perspective on this and how companies can be handling this well?
Yeah. I think each company thinks about these things differently. I've heard of, people Unfortunately, either being kind of fired or kind of you're released from the company for some of these videos. I don't have a lot of context, so I can't kind of speak on it with confidence. But I think I've seen this flash across kind of my Instagram app. I would say for me personally, I did one of these day in a life videos a couple of years ago at Meta. It was my first kind of Instagram reel. It's on my Instagram page, and it was kind of just a day in a life for me, coming into the office, kind of meeting with people, kind of grabbing lunch. And I did that more just as a way to kind of show other people who are interested in kind of working at Meta, what's it like to be, Aaron at work in a day of my life as, someone who works in kind of network engineering and kind of meetings with multiple different people and engaging with kind of building kind of community. I thought it'd be cool for people to see because it's a common question that I get. Now, it's not something I do every day. I love Instagram Reels, but I'm not doing a day in a life like, every week, right? It's not something that distracts me. Um, it's a creator economy today, right? I think Instagram, other apps too, have built kind of this creator economy that allows people to show off their creativity and monetize it and make a living from it. We have people who are creators at Meta who are amazing creators, right? And they make videos all the time. The key here is that it doesn't distract them from impact in their daily work and their daily job too. They're able to kind of balance both. So, from my perspective, as long as it isn't something that's distracting you from being able to do the job that you were hired for, I see no issue with it. People, can live, full lives and, pursue their passions in other areas outside of kind of their, quote unquote, kind of 9 to 5. And as long as it's not taking away from what you were hired to do, I see no problem with it. I love it. I love seeing those type of videos.
Particularly to that creator economy sentiment. Like there was a big push for young people to be technologists, engineers, designers, and
Mhm.
etc. And it seems like now there's a larger conversation, although there are some people who still want to do that. There's a growing conversation about this creator economy and being able
Mhm.
to be, full time YouTube, full time Instagram, full time, etc. Talk about how we can use these things to build wealth.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think whether it's Instagram or other kind of competitor kind of applications, which I won't name here. I think there's a good opportunity to leverage social media to build wealth where there's kind of residual income on the side, something small, or just to be a part of kind of your primary income by leveraging kind of multiple social media applications. And I have good friends and people that I know that do it quite well and have been able to kind of master this. I think if you're someone who's interested in pursuing a career as a creator, I think there are just so many outlets to get paid on Instagram or kind of other kind of applications or kind of Facebook, bonuses being kind of available, partnerships, brand partnerships and others that if you're really strategic about it and you build kind of a broader presence, this is why it's so important to leverage some of the AI tools that I talked about that can really help you kind of scale yourself. There is an economy that allows you to be paid for this if you're good at it, right? And I think if you want to take those things seriously, I think it's really useful to look at kind of the tools and resources available that teach you kind of the cheat codes that help you scale yourself pretty quickly and kind of create kind of this broader audience following. Because you can get paid to do those things. You can get paid quite well. There's a number of people that I'm very close with who do this constantly, right? And it's something that they enjoy because they get to be themselves in front of the camera. And it can be something, find something, if you're a creator that's relatable um, to audiences based on you being kind of authentic, right? If I'm someone who likes reading books and I have a book club, for example, finding kind of your niche and kind of your audience and doing what you do that's kind of original that speaks to other people who like books, right? How do I kind of create unique content that's going to speak to kind of people who are other kind of book enthusiasts, right? If I'm a runner, like I have a good friend who owns who started kind of a run club here, kind of in the Bay Area. She's built up this great following kind of in the Bay Area and use kind of Instagram to help her scale that. I mean, I think every week there's 700 to 800 people kind of in that Berkeley, kind of Oakland kind of area that attend kind of this run club and it started kind of on Instagram. Now she's a popular creator, right? So there's those things like being your authentic self and figuring out, what do I do that's interesting to other people who share some similar passion and how can I get kind of that content in front of them that's unique, original and authentic coming from myself to connect with kind of those, those followers and kind of those readers or people who are using social media who want to connect with you and similar interests, and understanding how to use the algorithm to your advantage. I mean, no one knows kind of the hidden sauce behind kind of the
Yeah.
algorithm. But, when you find, I think we do a good job of kind of connecting people with, similar interests or passions and kind of groups too. So if you're consistent, whether it's reels or kind of Instagram stories or kind of using kind of app, I think, people tend to find and kind of connect those audiences. So going back to what I said earlier in the conversation, figure out how to use AI to your advantage to be able to do that. You can.
I'm gonna get asked this question like kind of around the mountain, but I want to set the context for it. And so I've been in boardrooms and corporate rooms, corporate spaces where you get in and you realize these people ain't that smart. They like, and we have like you have this idea of what it's like to be in the boardroom, and then you get there and you're like, this is what these are the people that's on this board. Like, how, bro, how? And so I'm not
Yeah.
saying is so the reason I bring that up is because not to say that the people that you work with are not smart, because they obviously are smart. But the reason I
Mm-hmm.
position it that way is because sometimes we walk into the room believing that I'm gonna be so far behind, and
Mm-hmm.
I can't say anything because if I say something, I'm gonna sound stupid. No matter, and you already discounted your
Yep.
perspective, and so
Mm-hmm.
how I want to ask you about your first times being in leadership meetings. What was that like? How did you get over it to where you first put up your hand, you first interjected, and you were like, "Nah, that's whack. We should go over here." Because how did you get the courage to be like, I got something to say."
Yeah. Yeah. I love this question, Will. I think early in my career, the first time I got the opportunity to attend some of the senior leadership meetings, I was intimidated, right? I was afraid to say anything. And the first time I did speak up, I was stuttering. I mean, I was embarrassed, right? I was like, right? Yeah. And it happens to the best of us,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So fortunately, I had senior leaders around me who cared enough about my career and knowing how talented I was and seeing something in me who wanted to be able to kind of pull me aside and give me constructive feedback. You have to be open to constructive feedback, right?
hmm
I think a lot of people in their career, they take it as an attack, or their defense mechanisms kind of go up if someone tries to edify you. And you've got to keep an open mind. Like when people are willing to kind of pull you aside and kind of coach you and say, hey, like, I knew you're a little nervous in there, going forward, maybe think about doing XYZ or try to do this, right? Be open to those things and learn. And, I kept kind of an open mind. I would listen to people, kind of ask questions. And over time, as I did that in parallel while building confidence in my career and building credibility, as we kind of talked about before, they built up enough confidence to be able to kind of speak up and have a thought and kind of position on something and kind of say that with confidence. I think people respond to confidence too. If I'm waffling, I'm stuttering when I'm trying to pitch an idea, people don't even think I believe in it, right? But if I
yeah,
can say something with authority and confidence, knowing that I'm a subject matter expert, that I truly believe this and I have strong convictions and I have the data to support that, then I can speak openly about that, right? And as you do that repeatedly, people, you build a reputation of being kind of credible and, a thought leader in certain spaces. They give you confidence to be able to speak up, right? Notice how I just kind of lean forward and I was very intentional with the
yeah.
words, but like you have to think about your body language and kind of demeanor too. So that confidence comes over time.
Ar Aaron Russell, thank you so much for joining me, man.
Love it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Will.
Abs-
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely, absolutely.